myself set up here. So what I'd like to talk about today is happiness, which it's again one of those subjects that I think the Buddha talked about happiness, the Dalai Lama talks about happiness, Thich Nhat Hanh talked about happiness, but I think it's one of those subjects we're a little bit uncomfortable with in Zen. It's a little attachment-y sounding or something. It's a little bit clinging, perhaps, that we talk about happiness. But in the sense that the Buddha talked about happiness, Sakyamuni, he was talking about sort of the inner work of relinquishing all of our attachments, right? And being, therefore, perfectly content in this present moment. Now, that's a wonderful thing, and there's also a couple of problems with it. Because most of us that are practicing today, we're not in a monastic community where we have relinquished all of the aspects of our lives that might distract us from practice. And we are therefore able to focus more or less exclusively on that inner work of relinquishment, of non-attachment. We're in a world that's full of attachments. To the point that most of us are drawn into that in obsessive ways. It's a world that's created to make us more attached, to make us more obsessed, to make us more uncomfortable. Because when we are uncomfortable, we consume more. That's the fundamental premise that our culture teaches us. That if we're not happy, if we're not content, it's because we either have not enough of something or too much of something. We're seldom just right? So, not enough money, not a big enough house, not a good enough car. Right? We're constantly given those messages. If we only had the bigger house, the newer car, more money, we would be happy. Conversely, if we only had less fat on our bodies and we had more hair on our heads and we were shorter or we were taller or we were some other thing, we would be happier. These are the messages that our society gives us. They're extremely pernicious, but they are designed to keep our cup constantly half empty so that we are trying to fill it with purchases and possessions. Cosmetic surgeries, beauty products, on and on. We are taught that we are somehow inadequate. That's different from imperfect. We are imperfect, but that we are inadequate, and that the only way that we can achieve adequacy is to purchase more. And of course, that's a completely fallacious, empty promise. And we've probably all experienced that, that you make a new purchase and you get a few moments or a few hours or maybe even a few weeks of joy out of it, or I don't even want to use the word joy, but of pleasure. And then it fades. It's completely illusory. It's completely impermanent. It doesn't, things do not, cannot, will never make us happy. They cannot, will not ever make us content. So, in that sense, the Buddha is absolutely right. Who am I to say that he's absolutely right? Of course, he's absolutely right. But that this happiness is an inside job, as it were, an inside job. But and there's also a saying attributed to the Buddha that there's no happiness, no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. Now I'm going to be even more presumptuous and disagree with that. I think there is a path to happiness. And I'm going to share what I think it is this morning. And in part because it's just a practical reality, right? We need to live right now. We need to deal with the insanity of this world right now. We've just started another war in the past 24 hours. I am stunned by that. I am so upset by that. But that's the reality of this moment. So we have to live in this moment. We have to live in this world. We have to live in this crazy reality. And I see that as an obligation. We don't get to check out. Well, we can, but I don't believe that's an acceptable strategy. I think we have to engage. A slight digression. I've been thinking about Thich Nhat Hanh this week. In part, earlier back in the beginning of the week, I went to I since 2016 I've been kind of affiliated with a group. Its name has changed, but it's currently called Multi Faith Justice Maine, and it's a group of not exclusively clergy. Many of the people are clergy, but also people who have some spiritual or religious component to their activism. Um, and so I think it was Tuesday, beginning of this week, we had a prayer vigil at Susan Collins's offices, which to my way of thinking is a little bit like having a prayer vigil at the Antarctic ice shelf, hoping that we can melt it. But that said, it struck me as worth trying. And doing that reminded me the most powerful protest or action that I ever participated in was I may get the year wrong, but I think it was 2007. And it was right when we were having a surge in the Iraq War. And we were bringing up more troops and more munitions and all of that. And I was at the Zen Center of Los Angeles, part of my training as a priest uh, Steph and Margaret sent me there to spend a week to learn some ceremonies and things, which I did very badly at. I just had a great time in Los Angeles, and the teacher there clearly knew that I had no promise in Zen. But that's another story. Anyway, but when I first arrived there, everybody was going to a protest, and I was like, okay, I'm going. And it turned out it was in MacArthur Park, and it was led by Thich Nhat Hanh. He was there, and it's the most powerful protest action, whatever, that I've ever participated in. There were several thousand people there, whom I presume from the various garbs and roxus and things were all Buddhists or nearly all Buddhists practitioners, all different stripes, Tibetans and Vietnamese and Zen and so on. And that entire group, again, it probably was several thousand people at least, just walked slowly in silence. Thich Nhat Hanh led the way, and then everybody walked behind him, not uttering a word. And it was extraordinary. And the people in the community, they just like, you know, were baffled. They stopped, they looked, they're trying to, what's going on here? And one of the most striking things to me was the cops, LA cops coming to a protest at MacArthur Park. Those of you who remember the 60s and 70s remember that those have been lively from time to time. And so the cops were there, sitting on their cruiser drinking coffee because they had absolutely nothing to do. People were just walking, quiet. It was remarkable. Anyway, that got me thinking about Thich Nhat Hanh this week, because I think I, like a lot of Zen Buddhists, were dismissive of him and dismissive of his teaching. There was Daido Roshi, who was my first teacher, used an expression, Buji Zen. And it's as it was being used, it was very derogatory. It's kind of like bullshit Zen. It was, kind of like, you don't have to do, the Buji Zen is, you don't have to do hard work. You don't have to sit for hours, blah, blah, blah. You're just enlightened. It's okay. And I don't know that I ever heard Daido use that phrase in conjunction with Thich Nhat Hanh, but that's certainly the way that he was viewed by the people that I practiced with in my early days. It's just, Buji Zen. And then he went and committed an atrocity. And one day he called together all of his senior students and said, go forward and teach. You have the Dharma. You know what to do. Go teach. And the impression in the Zen world was that was heresy, because he bypassed the transmission process. He didn't have all these people go through all the hoops along the way, traditionally, to Dharma transmission. And it was taken in such a bad way that the American Zen Teachers Association specifically passed a whole set of membership requirements that Thich Nhat Hanh students would never be able to meet, so that they would never qualify for membership in the American Zen Teachers Association. So, for example, you had to pass, I don't know, a certain number of koans, I don't know, 1,000 koans, and you had to sit so many sessions, and things that they just didn't do. Okay. But I personally, I'm reconsidering, and I have been, Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching because he had an incredibly simple and gentle approach to the Dharma. And I think he had a lot to offer. And I for one, was wrong for, at least as I see it, for being dismissive of his teaching. And does that mean he was right about everything and we should give up our way of Zen and go do it his way? No, but I do think it's really worth listening to, really worth paying attention to. And Han talked about happiness quite a bit, as does the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama talks about happiness as a universal human desire, which I think that's a fair statement. Across cultures, across time, people everywhere would like to be happy. So while I understand this idea that there is no path to happiness and happiness is the path, I'm about to describe what I think is the path to happiness. And there are three parts to it. And I think this is important because this is so relevant to us today, to all that we're dealing with in our lives. The first part on the path to happiness is what I'm going to call contentment. And I'm going to refer back to what I was talking about a little while ago about how we're always made to feel not complete, not enough. And that's always related to some form of attachment. Again, we need more, we need less of something. Often, something that's commodified. We need to buy the thing, get the treatment, whatever it is. But contentment arises from being with just what we have as we are. That notion that as we are, what we have is perfect and complete. We don't need another thing. So whatever thing it is we think we need to relinquish that attachment. It's not that we might not purchase that thing or need that thing, but that attachment to that thing is not going to make us happy. There is no thing that is going to make us happy. There's no course that's going to make us happy. Right? There's no amount of money. Look at the billionaires. I was going to use the F word in context of billionaires, but I would just look at the billionaires. They're miserable. They are the ultimate hungry ghosts. They're going insane. In part because I believe that of having those billions of dollars, they have not found happiness. They're chasing it like crazy. If they just had another billion, maybe they'd be happy. I don't know how much. Well, Elon Musk has taken a plunge, right? He got up to about 170 billion at one point, didn't he? I don't know what he's at now, 29 billion or something. But but he's the poster child for the hungry ghost obsession. and he's got to make more money. Crazy. But we all do that at our own sort of scale. If I only had, fill in the blanks. Or if I only got rid of, fill in the blanks, I would be happy. And that's a complete falsehood, a complete myth. So the fundamental underpinning of happiness is being content with right where we are, right who we are, our imperfect bodies, our bald heads, whatever. It's okay. We are okay. We are okay just as we are. Okay. So we could also call that sort of freedom from greed. Right? What if we can free ourselves from that, we've gone a long way down the road of happiness. It's hard. Every time I go online, one of the things about being an old person is I'm like a target for every medical thing out there, every herbal thing out there. Every time I come online, it's like, do this and you'll live 10 years longer. Stop doing this or you're going to die tomorrow or whatever. It's kind of this huge kind of fear-based, greed-based thing going on all the time. I could read and this I'm learning about, probably people in med school don't learn about as many physical problems as we senior citizens are being introduced to online these days. It's like we could give medical education courses, because there are diseases. Oh, my word, right? Okay. Anyway, so this is all part of this attachment thing. It's not that at those diseases, but if I had whatever this pill is, that would be the one that'll fix it for me, right? So we get caught in these cycles. We've got to stop right here, right now. We're okay. Who knows how long we're going to live? Who knows what's going to happen in the future? We don't know. We just live right now, right here. Okay. That's the first part of the path. The second part, now this I'm going to be sort of dipping fairly far into the psychological realm, and it go kind of back to what, kind of I don't think these days we can totally separate Zen or Buddhism from psychology. Psychology brings us a lot of valuable insights. And there's some things, some places where it has a lot of value. Okay, anyway. And the piece that's here that's critical to happiness is connection. Connection. Now, years ago, I developed a model that I call the matrix of connectedness, which talks about connection at 6 different levels. And I'm going to enumerate those now because I think it's important. The first level is physical. Connection with our own physical being. Awareness of our body, awareness of our health, and taking care of ourselves. So this was kind of contrary to what I just said, but it's referring to doing it in a way that is not obsessive, that is not, chasing after something, but it's just like, okay, I'm going to simply take care of myself. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to get some sleep at night, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that includes things like exercise, yoga, tai chi, healthy ways of relating to our bodies. The second level of this matrix is psychological and emotional connection. Now, one of the big things that disconnects us at that level is trauma. when we experience trauma, we tend to pull back. We tend to go within a shell. People talk about building a wall. It disrupts the depth and texture of our relationships. So, very important work at this psychological, emotional level is learning to feel safe, to open up, to open our hearts, and to trust ourselves to be intimate with the world. And that can be, for those of us that have been traumatized, that can be a very hard and long project, but it's a very important project. The next level is the relational level. And at the relational level, I'm talking about our closest, most intimate relationships. Our families, our partners. We don't have many, none of us typically have many people at this level of our lives. But those who we deeply care about, deeply trust, again, our most closely held relationships, relational level. Then we come to the communal level. We're now expanding out into our communities, into our workplaces, wherever we're encountering others that we are developing meaningful relationships with. These are not the people who we're going to tell our deepest, darkest secrets to, but these are people who are going to share experiences. You know, in A, they say, share our experience, strength, and hope. Well, that's a pretty good way to put it. Share our experience itself, strength, and hope. Relate to. Get on the school board. That's at the communal, that's participation at the communal level, right? That's examples of those things. Then comes the eco-spiritual level. Connection to the natural world. Connection to all the other beings that we share life on this earth with, in this cosmos with. And when we're able to do that in a deep and intimate way, it expands us tremendously. And one of the reasons that I base the program that I'm running on eco-spirituality is because that can be an opening place for us to experience the other levels. For example, people who have been severely traumatized by the actions of other human beings can find a safe and trusting place in natural world where they can begin to allow their hearts to open and expand again, and subsequently learn to rebuild their relationships at other levels of their lives. Eco-spirit, very important. And finally, spiritual connection to what? Well, we have many names for it, okay? In Zen, we might talk about Buddha nature. And people with a theistic perspective might talk about God or goddess. And people from 12 steps say higher power. Excuse me. But I think that phrase, there's a phrase from 12-step programs that subsumes it all, which is a power greater than ourselves. And that might be the natural world. It might be other people. It might be our community. Or it might be something more theologically oriented. Okay, so those are the levels of connectedness of our matrix. And the more connections that we have at the different levels, the more satisfied perhaps we feel in our lives, the greater sense of belonging that we may have in our lives. So that connection is very important, but also because it sets the stage for the final level of this happiness project, which is service to others. Our greatest satisfaction, our greatest contentment, and this is my view, you can feel free to refute it, rises out of how we serve others. What we do to make this world a better place. How we use all of those levels of relationship. To bring greater contentment, peace, healing, whatever we want to call it, to other folks, to other beings. Other beings, I don't want to exclude it to humans. You know, 12 steps feel this way, and I feel this way strongly. That it's what we give away that makes us most whole, that makes us most happy. And in fact, we can't possibly give it all away. It comes back to us faster than we give it. It heals us faster than we feel our wounds. Very powerful. And this is all attainable. This is all attainable by each of us right now in our lives. I don't want to diminish the importance of realization of enlightenment, then I would be guilty of Buji Zen. But one of the things I've said before is we have no control of that. We can practice with sincerity, with integrity, and we have no control over how and when we will experience realization. But we have control over the things that I just described, over all of them. So that we can experience happiness, contentment, a certain degree of peace right now in our lives. And we can be active in transforming the world in that process. And goodness knows the world needs us right now. It needs every one of us. Contentment, connection, and service. Those three things. Thank you.
Um, Thank you, Peter. A couple of thoughts come to me. You say this is attainable. Um, and I want to go back just a little bit to the contentment part and attachment and and mention attachment to qualities which are not material, but such things as attachment to uh, how we see ourselves and how we deal with the disappointment when we do not live up to the way we like to think of ourselves.
Yes, well, that goes back to this idea that these expectations that are constantly laid upon us are making us in some way telling us that we're inadequate, right? And yet we always be, we will never escape our imperfection. That doesn't exonerate us from trying to do better. That's why we have precepts. That's why we have, but it also says if we're not perfect, that's okay because we're human. And as human beings, we will never be perfect. And so it, it's kind of one of those paradoxical things. I think that the answer in this case is that we need to strive to do better, but we don't want to strive to be perfect. Striving to be perfect is an attachment. Striving to do better is a good way to live our lives. Does that
And
respond at least partly to what you're raising?
yes, and attachment to uh, past events, which can't be changed, um, can be a tough one to let go of. How to accept one's inadequacies and um, imperfections.
There is no question about that. I, I hope that as I talked about this, I never said it was easy. It's attainable. It's something, I work at it every day. And some days I feel like, I may move forward a little. And some days I feel like, God, I just went way back there, but so it's a lifelong project. We will never, and that, but part of it is, that idea of coming to terms with our imperfection, that we will never be perfect. We will try and we'll try and we will never be perfect. And therefore forgiving ourselves for our humanity. When I work with people with addictions, one of the things I tell them is the two most destructive things are guilt and shame. Right? People early in recovery have just tons of guilt and shame. And if they allow that, that'll pull them right back into relapse. Those are such destructive emotions, and we all have a surplus of that.
So the attainability of these is a practice more than an attainment, more than someday we're going to have all this happiness. It's more a practice moving forward.
Well, yes, and yes, it is a practice. If we want to, it's something we need to practice probably for the rest of our lives.
Mhm.
But will we experience a certain amount of happiness along the way? Will we experience a certain amount of contentment along the way? Absolutely.
Okay.
You know,
Right.
it, it's a very worthwhile project. And moreover, we will benefit others. That final component of service, we will benefit others, right? That's our bodhisattva vow.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to try to say something about this in a way that is really unformed, but I'll just try. Yeah, I have a lot of that guilt and shame thing for things I've done from decades ago that I just feel like I fucked up in some way or it was something I did was bad for somebody in some way and blah, blah, blah. And it really I do tend to get stuck in that. And the one thing that seems to be, and I think I got involved in Zen partly, a large degree just because of that, And the thing that seems to be really helpful that I've been sort of working with lately is I haven't even talked to you about this particular thing. That the Zen perspective, sort of the absolute, we're all one and everything. I mean, I think that really is true. Like each one of us has our own ego that is act in the world and screwed up in various ways. And as part of the way our ego works, that we feel guilt and shame about it. But actually, though, our individual egos are just part of the entire world's structure. We responded to different things that happened in our lives. We have different genetic makeups that make us more prone to feeling certain ways and all that. And so, in a way, this I that feels all this guilt and shame doesn't actually exist as this separate entity, that, and so to the extent you know, we see that it's just part of the whole, everything we've experienced, and everything we've done is just part of the whole that we're responding to the entire world. We are not independent actors who did something bad, really. I mean, everything we did is a response to what happened to us. All we really have is a little spark of consciousness and awareness that can see all this, and we can develop the idea that we're this independent ego that can screw up or do something bad, and then we can feel guilty because we did that. But if we see that we're just part of the whole, and what we are in the moment is just a spot of awareness that is tied to our brains, which have these memories from the past, and it makes us have these thoughts. But we can sort of let go of the idea that there's this independent ego that is responsible completely. We don't have that much choice, really. There's a little bit of free will, maybe. I mean, there's even discussion about, is there free will at all? There's all this philosophical discussion. Is there even free will? If there's no free will, then there's really nothing for us to feel bad about. If there is free will, then there's this independence, that we can see the whole situation of the whole world, and there's a little bit of free will that says, okay, how can I make the situation better? And that means we can try to do better, using that little bit of free will that we have. We can just try to do better. We don't have to feel guilty about what we did in particular. The whole thing, the God of atonement, our beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance. It's not just me who was born 69 years ago. It's beginningless. It's the whole world's. And we get this obsession of just our little piece of it because that's the way our ears understand the world. But if we let go of that obsession, and it's the whole world's greed, anger, and ignorance, and all we can do is say, okay, what can I do to make things a little better? Starting with our own behavior, But anyway, so that's what I've been thinking about with respect to this.
Well, all that you say is, I think, from my perspective, true. But the critical aspect is that at the same time we have responsibility, which you kind of touched upon, right? I mean, it's like it's not nothing I do matters, you know. It's everything I do matters, and so I have responsibility, and simultaneously, and that's that. I've been talking with someone this morning about the identity of relative and absolute. That's such a critical teaching that's contained in that verse. And those of you who haven't looked at it should find it online.
Um,
Identity of relative and absolute.
the we have responsibility in this moment, but we can't change what happened in the past. We don't have responsibility for the past, unless there's somebody we can make something up to, that we heard, because then we are the only person that can do that. But the guilt relates to sort of an idea about the past. But we have responsibility right in this moment. Um,
Yes, yeah, yes, absolutely. But I also do feel we have that atonement has value. That acknowledging, there's a difference between acknowledging and taking responsibility for and feeling guilty about. Very different things in my view. And I feel like it's important that I acknowledge and if I've harmed others, if I've done things that are reprehensible in some way, I feel like I need to do some healing around that, some atonement around that. But that's not the same as wallowing, getting sucked into the guilt. Guilt does nothing. Guilt doesn't heal anything. Guilt doesn't change anything other than making us more miserable.
Hey, Peter. Um, First of all, I'm glad you brought up Thich Nhat Hanh because I've always respected Thich Nhat Hanh. Um, just as we're talking here, I'm reminded that there's no adequate use of language that's ever going to be able to get us to explain the reality of being awake to reality. So that's the attraction to Zen is that you practice and then practicing consistently allows you to live in a way where you don't have to say anything because your life is just an example of that practice, right? Um, so my question begs me to the question is the difference between what we practice and Thich Nhat Hanh's um, discipline, where to me it's a lot of the difference is just the concept of engaged Buddhism, which I think is what you're talking about a little bit, right? It's the choice that you make as an individual to basically how you practice, the manifestation of how you practice in your own everyday life. So my question was really like, I've always seen one of the things that turned me off about Zen Mountain Monastery was this kind of inward cloistering of the practice, whereas Plum Village is more about this engaged Buddhism. So, um, where do you, I guess, given your talk today, my question is kind of like, where do you see that going, in the Zen community? Um, do you want to, you know what I'm asking you? Like, where do you see this kind of going, like in our own practice and culturally, and like kind of what's needed in our culture today, given everything that's going on? Um, is it a fusion between the two? Is it kind of like I don't know. Just you know what I'm asking you? You get where I'm going with this?
Well, perhaps. This is part of my struggle currently. I don't have that answer. I feel that we are in the process. I am in the process. Zen is in the process, and and I don't know where it's going yet. And it probably will die before I get that answer. But I think just like everything else in the world, we in Zen can solidify. We could say this is the way it was done in the 1600s, and therefore, we're going to do it that way, right? Because that's the correct way. Dogen had it. Somebody we could pick. I don't want to pick on Dogen. Dogen was a wonderful teacher, but we can say, okay, we're going to do exactly like Dogen said we should do it, right? And in my view, that if we're static like that, we are missing out on being relevant to the current realities. Now, at the same time, we can become so amorphous that we lose the essence of our practice. So it's this dialectical possibility of being open to change, open to new ways of looking at things, open to new challenges of relevance in this time, and yet preserving the integrity of our way, of our practice, of our what Zen is fundamentally is a powerful transformational practice. To me, its whole value resides in that. If we don't transform through practice, then we might as well, you know, go to the beach, sit on cushions, right? This practice needs to morph us, morph our relationship to the world. Excuse me, in order to be relevant, to be true. Excuse me. So it's this constant dialectic as I see it. I'm already in trouble, right? I got sent away from Treetop. Something that I was doing or saying already was too heretical. But and I'm continuing it as a teacher to change. I don't think I help anything if I become static. If I get to a certain place and say rigidly, this is the way, only this is the only way we should practice. I don't know that. So, long answer to your question, Jim. I have no idea. I'm learning. I challenged myself this week about Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm relooking at the man's teachings, which I sort of dismissed early on out of hand because, like, oh, it's not real Zen, you know, and but there's wonderful aspects to it. In many ways, he was a wonderful, beautiful teacher, and so on.
Yeah.
Long answer to your question. I don't know if I actually answered it, but
I mean, I think you did. With intuitively, I think we probably all get that it's a journey, not a destination, and just kind of a cliche. But um, I'm just wondering where that exists. Like, because dogma really concerns me. Like, to me, dogma is the true root of all evil. Um, when you get religious or even philosophical practices that become so dogmatic, it shrouds your true nature. And in this practice, to me, this is just me talking Peter, my experience working with you and others is that, you practice to quiet your mind enough so you're opened up enough to see, you're awakened enough to see the true reality of existence, right? And from that, when you start to peek into that, to where Gary was talking about, you, yeah, again, it's kind of like language fails you, right? But you see the intense interconnection between everything that opens up this huge amount of compassion for everything, right? Because how can you not feel compassion for yourself once you see yourself and everything else, you know? And that's just the fundamental nature of it. Once you start to get it, to me, my worry is always like once you start to like worry about the number of bells and everything else, um, you could find yourself in a situation like you are in the United States today with fundamentalist Christianity, or like what they have in Iran with very conservative, dogmatic beliefs around Islam. So I don't know. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I think your answer is great though, because there is no answer, right? Just an ongoing process.
Well, I'm going to read you a quote from the Buddha. If I could find it quickly, I was reading it earlier this morning. Okay. I hope I can find it quickly. I had it here. Oh, God. I was trying to bring up the quotes, some quotes from the Buddha, and I ended up on fakebuddhaquotes.com.
I was going to say, if your Buddha quote is saying nothing, that's brilliant, Peter.
Well, yeah, but only the Buddha and Vimalakirti can get away with that. I have to say something. Uh, all right, see if I can get there now. Yeah, I think I found it. All right. Well, this is not exactly the one I was looking for. This is close enough. It says, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." And the Buddha said, if somebody else tells you that you're wrong, you know, you get to be the judge, you know. If you think what Peter is saying is bullshit, tell him. I'm not above criticism. Sometimes I start talking about things like Rupert Sheldrake, and then I'm told how far from the truth I am, but it's I think we have to retain that spirit. You are the ultimate arbiter of what's true for you. I'm not, right? And so everything that I say, my perception, my belief, my suggestion, you can throw out. Feel free. If it doesn't resonate with you, that was an important aspect of Stephen Margaret's teaching, was that sense of and it was important teaching from Shakyamuni Buddha. Just because I say it doesn't mean that you have to believe it. If it doesn't resonate with you in your heart, then don't worry about it. Let it go.
I appreciate that answer. And I just must say to the group, my wife just came home with the groceries, so I have to cut off now. That is the reality of my life at present.
Yes, we don't want you to incur that karma. Go and help.
Thank you.
I have to say something very quickly, and it has to do with your first point about contentment. I love to join the New Yorker caption contest, and I love to look through picture jokes, etc. And I've had one ready to go that I've wanted to pro offer to the New Yorker for years, and I've been kind of looking for an artist to draw this, and it has to do with your first point about contentment. And so my conception is that you're looking down at a bar, and there's two guys at the bar, and one of them is saying, I wish I had just enough money to do exactly what I'm doing right now. It just seems to sum it up, there you are in the present, and it's not enough. So anyway, when you brought that up, you hit me right the nail. Anyway, it was a delight to hear that, and obviously a profound lesson. Thank you, Peter.
Well, and of course, not just you, everyone in this culture, you know, the psychological sophistication of, there are people, brilliant PhDs in psychology, who are trying to figure out ways to part us from our money. You know, that's a whole industry. It's a whole industry that's using psychological insight. Advertising and the whole, media thing has come such a long way. So it's probably more pernicious than it's ever been. And by the way, we all have it's with us all the time. This is the greatest boon to marketing ever created. In all its incarnations, desktops and laptops and, tablets, the advertising media can reach us almost every minute of our lives. Sometimes I like to listen to kind of healing music, kind of soft, subtle solfeggio frequencies just to kind of help me relax. Or, get in a quiet space, in the present. And now those are interrupted by an advertisement almost every 10 minutes and somebody's screaming at me. It's like, you know how you're going to really lose weight? You got to stop listening to all those other people because they're not telling you the truth. And I'm going to tell you the truth right now. And if you just send me $300, we'll get you going right away. Right? So it's got like it invades everywhere of our life, of our existence.
And of course, if you
so,
pay money, that's the way to get them to stop screaming at you.
That's if you subscribe, then they leave you alone. But yes, you got to buy. You got to buy. So.
Speaking about guilt, maybe I should mention. um, Sometime in the late 90s, I got a call from Jeff Bezos because of technology I was working on that had to do with showing people the things that, in my mind, they would be most interested in. I had several conversations with Jeff Bezos about it because he needed that in Amazon. And so anyway, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I didn't, anyway, yeah. So I take responsibility for my role in the destruction of the world, which is occurring even as we speak.
Now we know who to blame.
Yeah. See, all along I thought it was Jeff Bezos, but it's Gary I gotta get.
Uh, no guilt involved, Gary. It just
Would have happened without me. I mean, no, it's not like, I mean, it was just one of those things that at a certain time, the technology is just ready to emerge,
Yeah,
and so
well,
people independent of me also came up with the same ideas at the same time.
and the process is going on and it's never ending. And you know, it the spiritual work that we have to do has never been easy. And I don't know, I don't know that I could say it's harder today, but boy, there's more and more ways of being intrusive. There's more and more ways of making us insecure, more and more ways of making us separating us from the possibility of happiness and contentment. Okay, it's getting late, and my happiness is dependent on getting near the ocean this afternoon. So,
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.